Popularity of Jurassic Park Hollywood series indicates that many people are actually mesmerized by them, by dinosaurs. Within the creation community, we realize that our Creator balanced all of creation with His beneficent hand of care and design. The dinosaurs have been paraded by the evolutionary community as fearsome monsters of the ancient chaotic past. But just the opposite is really true. A more accurate perspective portrays them as actually living contemporary with man. And we'll see in a moment, keeping the vegetation in check in the green world before the flood. Job chapter 40 describes this. And being compatible with mankind as well as the entire creation. Keeping the luxuriant vegetation in check in the pre-flood world was a task assigned to these gargantuan creatures known as the chief of the ways of God. Job 40:19. Now there are some phenomenal characteristics of these great creatures, so I want to talk to you about them. This is one of my favorites. We call Stegosaurus the Johnny Appleseed of the dinosaur kingdom. Who was Johnny Appleseed? He was an actual historical character. Throughout New England, he had thousands of apple seeds that he collected, and his name was Johnny Chapman. But he was known as Johnny Appleseed. Well, what he did in New England, he loved apples, and he saw that apples could sustain an entire family, and they could be preserved through the winter. So Johnny Appleseed got thousands and thousands of apple seeds, carried them on a special sack on his back, and he went through the entire, or as far as he could, the New England countryside, just distributing those in the areas where the seeds would germinate. And thousands of apple trees were produced as a result. So he was known as Johnny Appleseed. Stegosaurus was, by all accounts, the Johnny Appleseed of the dinosaur kingdom. First of all, he had no molars to grind up the seeds, no molars. But he had very precise, well-designed, sharp incisors. So he could cut into the ripening vegetation, and for his head size, he had large olfactory glands. What is an olfactory gland? Nose, nasal cavity. Had a very large nasal cavity. So he would be able to detect ripening fruit, etc., from a great distance. So that would attract him. Now he had a huge vat of a stomach, and then he had plates on his back. The first Stegosaurus plate I ever discovered and excavated, John Watson was next to me. He was one of our very finest geologists, now home of the Lord. And Burton Stokes documented this, one of our fine documentarians of yesteryear. This Stegosaurus plate was about that tall. What astounded me was that it had hundreds and hundreds of tiny little grooves for veins next to the surface, much like the ear of an elephant. Do you know when you go to the zoo, you see an elephant. What you don't see is next to the surface, just under the epidermis of the skin, are hundreds of tiny little blood vessels. And as the blood courses through, watch the elephant. He will crimp his ears, and that is to slow down the flow of blood, and that is to warm his body just barely. But then when he extends his ears out completely, the blood flows and he cools his body down by the radiation of the energy, the heat that's in his body. So he does all of that with his ears. Well, it appears that much like that, Stegosaurus was probably able to control those plate fins. And he needed to do so because if you're going to gobble up pizza I mean, gobble up ripening fruit like kids gobble pizza. They just exhume it. I mean, it's just gone. They inhale it. Don't we, Tom? All of us young guys eat it like that, don't we? Yeah, you're right. So that's the way to eat it. So all of that, without masticating that with his molars, all of that is just a big compost pile. And the seeds are all intact. Then when he redeposits the compost, all of the seeds have the potting soil. The potting soil is in place. The seeds are in the potting soil. And with the electromagnetic energy, you need a copy of the DVD series back there called The Model, where we document what the electromagnetic field was prior to the flood, and we have good handle on what it was like before the flood. And with the pulsed electromagnetic field, many of the seeds, with that and the sound of the morning stars picked up in the canopy. I just went through 2 chapters in 3 sentences there, but all of that to simply say, because of the physical effects of the world before the flood, those seeds could germinate overnight. So he was the Johnny Appleseed of the dinosaur kingdom. Wow, what a world, and what a creation, and what a creator. He had no molars to grind up seeds from the fruit he harvested, so he subsequently passed those seeds into the compost of the fermenting silage from his stomach. The spikes on his tail could be used for defense or for raking the vegetation he was harvesting. The series of unusual plates running along his back could be used for protection or as heat exchangers, and I prefer heat exchangers.